It's time for Talking Michigan Transportation, a podcast devoted to the conversations with people at the forefront of the ongoing mobility revolution. In the state that put the world on wheels, here's your host, MDOT Communications Director, Jeff Cranston.
Hi, once again, welcome to this week's edition of the Talking Michigan Transportation podcast. This week I'm very pleased to have with me John Peracchio, who is the chairman of the Michigan Council on Future Mobility, and he's going to share insights on the council's work.
I remember being at one conference and the Secretary of the Department of Transportation of the state of Louisiana cornered me and just said, hey, we've got to get on the ball with connected and automated, and we look to Michigan as a great example and as a leader.
We're also going to talk about connected and automated vehicles, which is part of the council's mission in their portfolio, but it's not everything when it comes to the future of mobility, and John will explain why that is. And we're also going to talk about what that means, what automated vehicles could mean to the future of mobility, and especially in a state like Michigan with an elderly population, and what I think is really an imperative to try to provide more mobility options and extend the freedom for people as they age.
That's where we have a huge opportunity to make people's lives easier.
We're going to talk about toll roads again because the bill that would authorize that study of tolling is making its way to the full Senate floor. And if I was a betting person, I think it's going to make it out of the legislature and to the governor's desk. And John has a unique perspective on these things and some expertise, as a matter of fact.
I think the interest of the Council on Future Mobility in tolling is less about the revenue generated or how the money will be spent, but more to make certain that technology is a part of the study.
And then we're going to talk also about electric vehicles, which are kind of going hand in hand with the development of automated vehicles. And a big question that keeps coming up, and I see this in media more and more, about the disposal of batteries. So John, thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
So Jeff, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So let's start by talking about the council. And it was created in 2016, and very, very strong bipartisan support for the package of bills that enabled testing on the roads of actually operations on the roads of automated vehicles in Michigan, and the council was a key part of that legislative package.
That's correct. So Public Act 332 of 2016 created the Council on Future Mobility. It is the same law, as you pointed out, that enables on-road testing of highly automated and connected vehicles on public roadways. The council's statutory responsibility is to advise the governor, the legislature, and the heads of relevant state departments on how best to promote the development of technologies associated with connected and automated vehicles. And the council has expanded that a bit on its own to include enhancing personal mobility in the state of Michigan. The council is comprised of 21 members, pretty evenly split between the public sector and the private sector. We have 4 legislators who are non-voting members of the council, but often are very active participants. And we are required at least to do one annual report to the governor and the legislature, which we have done each year since 2016. And that report highlights the vision of the council, its mission, sort of the background principles of making recommendations on policy, and then explores various action items that the council determines at the beginning of the year and then works through the course of the year.
And it's one of the things that really sets Michigan apart, and I guess allowed Michigan to continue to be a national leader in terms of what we can do in government to support academia and private industry in the development and deployment of automated vehicles. How important would you say the council is to that, considering that other states don't have something like the council?
Right. So it's interesting. I and my colleagues at Michigan DOT have been approached by officials from a number of states. And I have provided a copy of the law that created the council and enables on-road testing of highly automated vehicles, as well as our annual reports. I remember being at one conference and the Secretary of the Department of Transportation of the state of Louisiana cornered me and just said, hey, we've got to get on the ball with connected and automated, and we look to Michigan as a great example and as a leader. And I think that we've always been open to collaborating with other states. That's been our policy, and we share any of our learning that they are interested in with them.
So let's talk, even though you make the point, and I completely agree, and I think the council members completely agree that the council can't be entirely about automated vehicles and traditional vehicle travel, that there are a lot of other things going on with the future mobility, and we talk about transit and obviously paid a great deal of attention to the mobility challenge and that transit component. But since a lot of this was tied into connected and automated vehicle legislation, what do you think the future holds? Do you think that some people are being too optimistic about when we'll move to highly automated, let alone fully automated, or do you think it's going to be a slower track than some experts predict?
Well, my personal view, and it seems like that view is being more widely adopted, is that it will be a long time before you will see fully autonomous vehicles, particularly in mixed traffic, in volume deployment. It's just very difficult to conceive that these systems will be able to work with the myriad of not just vehicles, electric or internal combustion engine driven, but around pedestrians, bicyclists, people on scooters, dogs on skateboards. I mean, the traffic world is very diverse and very complicated, and the way we humans interact with other vehicles and with other modes that are around the public roadways is unique. And for robotic systems to be able to do that, it's a huge challenge. Now, I will say this. Even though I think, as I say, it's fully autonomous is a long way off, the technologies that are being developed for highly automated vehicles, short of that, are very beneficial to preventing crashes and saving lives. Advanced driver assistance systems are now using the technologies that have been developed for highly automated vehicles. And this is really important because we lose a lot of people on the nation's roadways. We lose people in Michigan, and to be blunt, they really do not need to be killed or injured. We have technologies that can, at a minimum, mitigate those risks.
I have to believe that the reason, after we had been trending up some, both nationally and in Michigan, in fatal crashes the past several years, and then started to trend down last year, and I think the numbers again at the end of this year will show a slight decline. And that's tied into the technology, I believe, because it's not because we're creating fewer distractions for ourselves. I mean, those are growing worse all the time. But at the same time, the fatal crashes are diminishing somewhat, and this technology has to be part of that reason.
Absolutely. Crash avoidance technologies that are now, routinely incorporated into newer vehicles make a huge difference, and it's very important that we continue to develop these technologies, which is why the original premise for creating the council to promote the development of these technologies is no less relevant, even though the volume deployment of fully autonomous, or what I call robot vehicles, is probably a long way off.
It's interesting. You've noticed this, and I have too, because we've commissioned a couple polls on this just to gauge Michigan citizen reaction and their feelings about automated vehicles. And if you ask people if they like anti-lock brakes or lane assist or rear assist or just about any crash avoidance technology we've created, they say yes, overwhelming numbers. The hands go up. And then you say, how do you feel about driverless cars? There's a lot less enthusiasm. And I think people haven't made that connection yet to how these things are going to creep up incrementally, and before you know it, your car will be completely outfitted.
Right. And I think the way you get people comfortable is through pilots. There's a company that I know you know well, May Mobility, that is working with Bedrock, part of the Dan Gilbert family of companies in downtown Detroit. They just deployed a pilot in Grand Rapids. We had an opportunity at a council meeting over the summer to ride in those vehicles. It was very, very interesting. And I think the more people see that and even maybe participate by riding in a highly automated or fully autonomous shuttle like those, I think the public acceptance will increase. That said, those deployments are on very carefully mapped and geofenced areas. So the safety level is very high when you have that kind of control. And that's the challenge, right, for a wider deployment, is that you need a lot of information, you need really good sensors on board, and all of that has to converge in order to provide a safe ride for people.
Well, so yeah, you remind me that I need to check in on how it's done since the launch in Grand Rapids, because I see them on the circuit, that they've created every day. They go, around the YMCA and the Grand Valley campus, and then a loop through downtown. And anecdotally, I see people using it, but I don't know the numbers, and I'm curious about that. And same in Detroit. I'd like to find out if they're starting to grow their ridership. It'd be interesting.
Absolutely. I know that it's been very successful with Bedrock, because they're shuttling people from remote parking structures to the various offices that are in the Bedrock group, and that's great. I mean, but back to the point about data and information being required. Those routes are very carefully mapped. And also, as you know, the council has sponsored a mapping project with a council member's company, Continental, to create a hyper-accurate, high-definition map of certain state roadways in southeastern Michigan. That database will be available to any public or private entity that wants to do research and development in the state of Michigan. These sensor systems are great, but you still need a hyper-accurate map in order to safely locate a vehicle on a roadway.
No, I'd call the council's work on that mapping project probably its most significant contribution so far, really.
I agree.
And you deserve some credit for that, so there you go.
Okay, well, I wasn't trying to put a feather in my cap, but I do think people need to understand that, just using, for example, a GPS system to locate a vehicle gets you within 2 meters. Some systems are pretty good, about 1 meter, but you got to double that, right? You got to think of a 2-lane highway, and 2 meters is a lot of slop for locating a vehicle. 1 meter is still problematic. Hence, you need that hyper-accurate map so that the vehicle knows precisely where it is.
Well, I think the question, the overall question about how quickly these evolve really comes back to our multitasking ways, and the fact that, despite all kinds of campaigns and things telling people to, put their phones down, put their devices down while they're driving, humans are humans, and they're still going to do things. And until we can, make it so you can be in that car on your long commute and still be getting something done, I think that will really incentivize people. And so you'll see it on expressways and places where it makes more sense that, like traffic is together, because you're not going to have those same issues trying to figure out, how to accommodate scooters and dogs on skateboards. And speaking of which, do dogs on skateboards have the right of way?
I don't know, but you're reminding me of an ad. I'll just mention it's a Geico ad. They do some pretty clever stuff, and they have all these dogs grabbing smart devices away from their owners' vehicle.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I have. Yeah.
To me, that is hilarious. I think we should try to get a hold of that and send it to everybody we know in the auto industry. I think it's absolutely hilarious and really to the point where you just have to put the thing down. And I agree with you. I think if you're talking about like a level 2 SAE level 2, maybe even 3, although 3 is a little scary for me. If we're talking about a highway with exits that are not right next to each other, and entrance ramps that aren't right next to each other, that's where we have a huge opportunity to make people's lives easier on commutes and on long trips. And I think the technologies are going to advance to the point where we will see that type of deployment maybe in the intermediate term.
Yeah. Because, and I think that's why the polling still shows that people, for the most part, don't think that this computer-driven vehicle could be safer than I am, because I'm a good driver even though nobody else is, right? So.
Right. No, it's a fair point. And another issue is that, fully autonomous vehicles or a vehicle in highly automated driving mode has a tough time conveying what's called robotic intent to people in vehicles that are not highly automated. So a lot of the crashes involving highly automated test vehicles are rear-enders because, let's say, a pedestrian begins to walk across the street in front of the highly automated vehicle. The person in back of the highly automated vehicle sees the pedestrian. Maybe they make eye contact, and they know that pedestrian is not going to just walk across in front of the highly automated vehicle. The problem is the highly automated vehicle doesn't know that. So it might slam on its brakes, and then you have this rear-ender. And so the car companies are now struggling with another challenge, which is how to convey robotic intent to people driving non-highly automated vehicles.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move on to tolling and toll roads. And this has generated a great deal of interest in Michigan. I think some of it is probably over enthusiastic about how quickly something would happen and where it would be. There's interest all over the state, and my guess is that once the study is done, if anything happens, it's going to be on some pretty limited corridors, definitely downstate where it makes most sense. But what's your feeling about where Michigan is now, given its history, sort of rejecting a Turnpike Authority back in the 50s and not seriously revisiting it since then?
Okay, so the first thing I point out to folks is that we do have tolling in Michigan. The Mackinac Bridge has a toll. The other international crossings, Sault Ste. Marie and Port Huron, and of course in Detroit, you have to pay a toll to use a bridge or use a tunnel. True. All right. So in terms of feasibility, well, of course it's feasible. I mean, other states have done it. I think the interest of the Council on Future Mobility in tolling is less about, the revenue generated or how the money will be spent, but more to make certain that technology is a part of the study and hopefully a part of the ultimate solution or deployment, if that's what the legislature and the governor decide to do. And a number of states have done pilots that are very interesting. The one that comes to mind is in Oregon. It's called OreGo. It's been running for years. And they use a variety of mechanisms to do what I call non-traditional tolling. In other words, you don't have gantries, you don't have toll booths and people taking cash or throwing coins into baskets. What they do is they actually track the vehicle miles traveled of these vehicles and apply a theoretical charge to however far they travel on a predetermined roadway. And if the bill becomes law, that's headed to the state Senate right now, if that becomes law ultimately, I would urge Michigan DOT to look at the various connectivity technologies that could enable an innovative tolling solution in Michigan.
Yeah, that's the thing that obviously you know this a lot better than I do, but a lot of people's first thoughts are about the traditional infrastructure that they've seen in the states that have tolling, and that just would not be the methodology anymore.
Well, I certainly wouldn't recommend it. You could do it. That's why I say it's certainly feasible, but using technology and the vehicle-to-infrastructure connectivity, I think is a much more interesting and frankly a better solution. And also, I just want to point out, in terms of feasibility, we can also deal with social equity concerns. So for folks that have lower income but need to use a toll road to get to work, to access health care, we can qualify them for a lower toll rate. And that's difficult, a huge opportunity.
That came up in the Senate hearings, as you know, and that's a huge issue in other states. Have you seen another state deal with that in what you think is truly an equitable and manageable way?
Well, I think a number of states have tried to do it in different ways. So, for example, this is now a near-term future. situation, the Central Business District tolling project in New York City. What they have done is decided to provide tax credits to lower income people that are within the congestion zone. Now, I personally am not a big fan of that. I prefer, just from a practical accounting and reconciling perspective, I would rather charge folks a lower toll rate based on a qualification, either lower income or if you're disabled and you need to access the area for health care. That's how I would do it. But in New York State, they decided to issue tax credits. So that's an example of how you could solve that.
So do you feel, and again, I know this, I'm just asking you for an opinion and not for you to weigh in any official capacity, but is tolling a fairer fee or tax for drivers than the gas tax?
Okay, so I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question, because that's kind of loaded, but here's what I'll say, is that tolling with social equity integrated into the complete solution and platform is not as regressive as having a gas tax, right? Or a sales tax, for that matter, right? Because those taxes apply no matter what your income level is. We can design a tolling system, I think, to be fair and equitable to folks who are at lower income or have some other special social need that, as a matter of policy, we want to address. Yeah,
that would be a must, I think, to truly get, bipartisan and broad support if the state does go ahead with it. But, it's good to be thinking about it now, obviously. So let's touch lastly on where you think things are going with electrical vehicle technology. And again, I guess the same question that I had about automated vehicles. Do you think that the projections are overly enthusiastic for those who support electric vehicles, or do you think this is really starting to take off?
So I believe that public acceptance of electric vehicles is directly proportionate to the build-out of EV charging infrastructure. And so if you have enough charging infrastructure to make people comfortable to address the so-called range anxiety, I think you'll see people buying those vehicles. But if we don't address the charging infrastructure, I think it will be very difficult to get people to purchase those vehicles in volume. I think the cost thing is going to get worked out. The cost of the batteries will drop as volumes go up. So I'm not as concerned about the pricing, although new cars in general are very, very expensive, and hence you see loans going out 5, 6, even 7 years. But back to charging infrastructure, I believe that's critical for public acceptance.
Yeah, so whenever I hear people talk about or I read about range anxiety, I feel like it's often raised as like this mythical thing, but it's a very real thing. It's not just anxiety, it's a real concern about whether I can get from here to here, right?
So. No, it's absolutely true. So as you know, Michigan State University, at the behest of the Michigan Energy Office, did an analysis of what it would take to get from Detroit to Traverse City, right, with EV charging. You can't do it today, right? And they identified where the charging stations would need to be, and of course you could put them there, right? But that's the kind of analysis you need to do all over the place in order to get folks comfortable.
Yeah, and we've got, at least one champion in the legislature, Representative David LeGrand from my city, Grand Rapids, who's pushing it with great vigor.
Right, I've spoke with Representative LeGrand. I mean, he's got a lot of creative ideas, and I think that's good. You've got to start the discussion. You have to have the debate about how we're going to finance the build-out of EV charging infrastructure. Public utilities, of course, they're in the business of selling electricity, and they would love to build out charging infrastructure, but they want that rate increase on everyone.
So are the advocates thinking enough about the batteries and battery disposal? Is this a lot like nuclear power when it first came on the scene and everybody was focused on how great it was going to be and nobody was thinking about the waste?
Okay, so I won't go that far, but I don't think we've really thought through the battery recycling the way we need to, although all of the car companies, to my knowledge, have folks that are actively working on recycling in parallel with the deployment of electric vehicle technology. So that's good. That's really good. There's more good news, which is even when a battery is no longer suitable for powering a vehicle, it retains 70 to 80% of its charge capacity. Why is this important? Because then we can use those to store electricity to be able to charge electric vehicles or to capture, let's say, solar power or wind. And then you charge vehicles. They can be integrated into the grid system and the transformer system so that when no one needs the electricity can go back and feed into the grid. So there are opportunities here with batteries that, because they don't retain 90 to 100% of their charge capacity, and that's really required for the acceleration and to provide the range, but we could still use them for other purposes.
Yeah, I think that reuse component is really, really good, and I think that's got a lot of benefits. So, well, more on that. And John, thanks for taking the time to do this. I'll definitely talk to you again, and next time I'm going to ask you up front which questions you were hoping I won't ask, and then I'll ask those first.
Please, that'd be great, Jeff. Thank you so much. Look, it was great to do this. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
That's a wrap for this edition of Talking Michigan Transportation. Check out show notes and more on SoundCloud or by subscribing on Apple Podcasts.